Hi, my name is Benedict. Today's video is actually as a flow-on from a question that I answered on Quora. And the question was, why does the bass in a song make it sound weightier? That's the only information I had in which to answer the question, so we don't really know whether this guy's talking about rap or bass music, which is all built to only sound in a sub, or is he speaking broadly? So I thought this is actually a really valid thing because there is a fair amount of confusion. I see a lot of people getting a bit lost there. And then when they come to their mixes or listening to their final piece, they go, this doesn't sound as, as I want it to sound. And what's gone wrong there? Often what happens is what's gone wrong is that they think that adding lots of low frequencies gives you a great bass. Once you've got a great bass, you've got a killer tune, man. It's a little bit arse about. In actual fact, you can end up with a driving track, because really who cares whether there's a bass player or not? Who cares whether there is a bass instrument or not? The punters really don't. It's only in the last few years that people have started to be like, bass man. You're like, really? But that's because they're obsessing about a technicality. But when it's done right, even within that, that's why they're so excited about the bass man. So we'll look at the factors that actually build up a successful mix where the bass is playing its role, and also show you some things that you absolutely probably wouldn't have expected, and show you that they still work. Which means that once you understand these things, you're in a lot better position to play around with things. So, one of the challenges that I set in that answer on Quora, and I'll try and remove the link to it down here in case you want to read it, but basically we're going to cover it here, was that I said the bass's role as an instrument, whatever you're using as a bass, boing, 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 its role is musically not to introduce certain hertz into your frequency range, but it's to underpin the melodic structure, the chordal structure of your song, your piece of music, and B, to underpin the primary rhythm of your song. Now you can get more complex and get into that kind of bass playing, and that's cool, but its fundamental role still tends to be the boom, 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 boom. Don't care whether you think that's boring or not. That's the very fundamental of what a bass is there to do. So, my challenge was to say, well, firstly, take a 4-bar piece, have your chord progression, have your bass just play the bottom notes of your chords. We're assuming we're working within a key and scale, because we're somewhere resembling sane. And therefore, if we start with our drums and piano, that's our piece, but it doesn't have a bass in it. It's okay, but it lacks that drive that we'd have if we had a bass. So the most sensible thing to do would be to say, if you look at this, you see that here's our chords, here are our chords, to get my grammar correct, and here is our bass, which is tracking them. Don't believe me? Let's open it up. There you go, tracking them 1 octave down. It's just taken that note there and played it. Now, despite the fact that we've got a slight discrepancy in our rhythms here, like we've got a hit here, but we don't have a hit here, we don't have a hit here, but we have a hit here, I've played this as basically as possible. Well, it could be simpler, but basically, as I said on the answer in Quora, play on the 1 and the 3. And that's it. Just played my root notes on the 1 and 3. So now, we'll just move that again. So you hear how that has actually emphasised. It's added some whoop, whoop into some drive into what we're doing. Easy for you to think, but yeah, Benedict, you said that it had nothing to do with frequencies, and that's playing low, so it's a proper bass, so you don't know shit, and all your Metallica t-shirt sucks, and yeah, whatever, piss off. Let me show you something that you probably wouldn't expect. Here is that same line, exactly the same line. Bugger it, grab them all. Play it up. There it is. Choose my high. There it is. Same thing. It's played up on the bottom note of the chord. So literally, we're one octave up from where we were. Let's mute him to start with. Now, if you're listening on anything resembling reasonable speakers or even these god-awful cans, you should be going, hang on, it's not like gangster bass, but at the same time, when that octave up bass is in the mix, the piece actually gains some drive, some power. I say that not to say that you need to compose your basses up here like you're level 42 or something. But sometimes it's a great way to mix a bass up high. Pit Hook from Joy Division, commonly played right up here. Why? Because there wasn't any way he could be heard otherwise. There's another bass player, and I don't remember his name. I watched a YouTube video on him. He was talking about bass playing, and he was saying quite commonly plays fairly high. Great bass lines. Still provides the drive in the piece that he's looking for. And if you listen to Joy Division's Lost Control, she's lost control again, that works really well. It provides a lot of drive to that piece, despite the fact that it's not. So I'm merely trying to break that immediate association with bass has to be at like 2 hertz or it's not bass, to say that the musical role of a bass is to drive the chordal structure, the musical structure, to underpin and emphasize that, to say to the listener, this is what we're listening to in terms of key, chord, the fundamentals of your melody and what's going on, your harmonies, but to add just that extra little bit of drive. So here it is again. Bass playing an octave up. No bass. Octave up. Back where you expect it to be. Okay, where you expect it to be is probably the best. But remember, in not in every situation is it the best. When it's playing an octave high, it is still providing its role. Now, the other thing that I challenged there was to say, well, what if you just played random notes, random timings? Now, this is really just to say that the positioning of your bass notes is what has an impact, along with the actual notes that they play. So here we've got random notes. As you can see from my somewhat amusing dancing skills, we've got a strange random thing that doesn't feel connected. So if we A-B, we've got that makes our piece feel more solid. The random it actually undoes some of the weight of our piece. So, in terms of composition, you want your bass instrument, whatever that is, you want your bass instrument to primarily focus on, this is in C major, you want it to primarily focus on the root note of the key and scale. If I'm working in the C major, that's C. If I'm working in D major or minor, that's D. If I'm working in F sharp major or minor, that's F sharp. Whatever that is, that's your home. You want your bass to focus on that, because that makes the listener hear and know where home is. And we all want to be home, because home is where we're comfortable. If you're not, find a bloody new home. You've then secondarily got where your chordal movement is. Depends how you compose. Some people will compose with a chord structure like this and then put melody on top of it. Some people will tootle around with something resembling a melody and then work out what their chord structure is. Some people kind of do neither. If you're of the do neither camp, that is okay. Not excellent, because you're lacking the understanding that theory brings you. But if you're just got kind of random notes up here, then at least look at your bass and try to have it echo those notes. Let's say your piano line was here, then they're the notes we'd probably try to echo. Or absolutely failing that, and what they do in dubstep is, or sorry, more Psy, but they do it in dubstep, they're doing all EDM, is to just choose, well, this is what the root note of my piece is, and that's what you play in. Only and ever. So that would be C. That's the only bass note you ever play. That's what's called a grand bass. Was done in medieval times, so it is a perfectly acceptable thing to do, but just understand that it lacks a little bit of sense of movement. Your piece will tend to feel initially weighty, then stolid, then like, well, you probably should have gone to the loo a week ago. It gets a bit, after a while, if you can't create some nice harmonic movement, which puts you back to knowing some theory again. So, keep your fundamental timings. So if we were to zoomify in on this, your kick, just bring them into the kick goes on your first. Here we go. Your kick goes on your first, your snare goes on your second. So, I'm sorry, it's a bit of a pain. So keep your bass playing to your downbeat. Either skip your snare and play again on your downbeat, or that's your basics. Doing even just your basics works surprisingly well. If you question that, go listen to real country music, not bro country, because that's just EDM, but go listen to real classic country and you'll hear this really simple boom, 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 boom kind of bass lines, but it works wonderfully. So key and scale and the chordal movement, emphasizing the fundamental parts of your rhythm. You can then get more interesting, like you see the piano here has something extra. It's got an extra little beat happening in there. They're accents, and that's where you get interesting. So boom, 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 boom. They're your accents, but you see that they don't get in the way of playing the fundamental role of what that bass line's there to do. The second half of that question or equation, the answer that I gave, was really about looking at the frequency thing. So if we look at the frequency thing, actually I can get rid of that, and I can get rid of that so that we're go away. So that we are looking at just the synth. Let's get him a bit out of the way. Actually, it's not going to let me do it from there. There we go. Now this is the straight bass, which was set to play 1 octave below. So if my piano was playing C3, my bass was playing C2. Now it's very tempting to go straight to dropping an octave, playing C1 or even C minus. Ooh, look at that, down at 40 Hertz. Sounds great if you've got a great system. Sounds sometimes even more great if you've got those really kinds of headphones. But the problem is, in the real world, not many people have a system that even knows what 40 Hertz is. So the problem is, if you mix down there, you'll be doing this. Sounds great. The problem is, look how much the frequency range is, the volume range is using. Huge amounts. It's basically, that's our whole piece taken up already. And if you're not listening on a great system, you can't hear me press that note at all. You only know I'm doing it because you can see it here. So be cautious about how low you go, because it can be your undoing. I've shown this lots of times before, but people sort of really seem to struggle to get it because it's, to them, counterintuitive. Again, tempting to boost here, but look, I'm pinning my meter already. I don't have my dynamic range there at all, and you're still probably not hearing it super well, especially not if we got into a mix where we had to turn that down so that we can make space for the mix. Hello. Remember how when I showed you where we played that bass line an octave up, and while you sort of thought, yeah, but it doesn't sound manly, you could still notice that it brought some of the drive of what the bass line is supposed to do into that piece. Here is the mix engineer's understanding based on that. I can boost the first harmonic. Sound disappears. Sound gets a lot louder, but look, we're not using up anywhere near as much of the volume range of our whole piece. And if you're on a tiny system, if you're silly enough to be listening to a mixing tutorial using your phone speaker or a laptop speaker or something like that, you might just be able to start to hear that bass. If we go up higher, now you can start to hear that bass. So, what we learn from our bass up high is that there's a whole lot of psychoacoustics there. You're physically making that instrument appear in the right notes and the right timing creates that sense of pulse, of drive, like you turn the kick drum on. The psychoacoustics is that we're a major pattern matching system. This thing up here, it just matches patterns. If you don't know what a microwave is, I can show you a microwave and you'll come up with all kinds of answers based on things you do know. Is it a television? Is it a magic box? Is it a pathway to God? If I shake a stick with rattles on it, will it drive that demon out? Because these are the things you know. Microwave you don't know. But if I explain to you what a microwave is, and I show you, and I pull out some cold pizza that I turn into hot pizza, you'll go, bugger me, microwave. I show you another microwave, and straight away your brain is going to go, microwave. So, if we show our brains this first harmonic, and it's a bit loud, a bit louder than it should be, the human brain goes, well, that fundamental should be there, and it should be louder than the first harmonic. It turns the volume up in the old noggin. and we can go quite a long way up, and we're still appearing to add bass. Up here, not so much, but it's still providing a fair amount of cut. So where you're looking to give the illusion of vast amounts of bass down here, in the kidney upsetting area, don't go down here. So while it sounds great in solo, you've blown your levels, and unless somebody's listening on a sub or something like that, they can't hear it at all. Somebody sent me something the other day, and I'm just thinking, this mix is really messed up. There's just stuff up here, and then there's nothing. Turns out that he was using basically sub stuff that wasn't audible on a normal system at all. So I had to sort of say, I can't play with that at all, because while I've got nice monitors that do very nicely with bass, thank you very much, if I can't hear what's in your mix at all, something's a bit broken. It's a style, whatever. So with the understanding of the psychoacoustics, you can now look at pushing your bass a little higher in the range, either by playing it a little higher or simply by mixing it a little bit higher. And if it's still obeying those basic rules that people want to hear, don't care what you think about your genre, if you want to hear that coming in on the beat and the drop comes and you when you like it, then that means it's still obeying those basic rules. Okay, it may not sound like a polka or an old ugly dude playing in a country band, but it's still those basic rules. The human brain wants those things. So understand, choose your right beats, which are generally 1 and 3. Rock and roll's prone to being on the 2 and the 4. If there's a backbeat, we can use it. But EDM tends to be 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 3. And that's going to give you a far better mix based on what you're looking for. Now, I seem to recall I had one other point in here. Pattern matching. Ah, yes, I was going to go through this. I have gone through this before, but it is well worth covering again. What we'll talk about is the ease of hearing. So the human brain is all about how it perceives things. You like a bassier sound because it actually allows you to hear what's going on easier or easily. Let's actually drag this right out. So we've got, if I play C3, actually we'll turn this off, you can see the fundamental and the overtones. Let's brighten this fella up. Sounds pretty good. Actually, that's... Now we've got a C3. Fundamental, overtones. If I play that up here, you can see those overtones. There are fewer of them, partly because the computer has to round them off. But you can't really hear them. If we were to take this gets brighter, but it's not as easy to hear those harmonics clearly as if we're down here. Hear how rich that sounds? Wow. And if we drop that again, each of those harmonics is actually further apart. So it's easier for us to differentiate them. in a low-pitched sound than it is in a high-pitched sound. So as I commonly say to people, and I remember asking my father this very question when I was about 15, like, why is it that top notes from a violin sound an awful lot like top notes from an electric guitar? And his explanation is basically what I'm giving you now, is that the higher the fundamental of the sound, the higher the note that you play, the less difference there is. Those harmonics are closer together, less differentiated, and we can't separate them out very well. So, quite similar in terms of sound. What we hear, what we perceive. Down low, even just a normal guitar playing its E, playing its low E, we can actually say, oh man, that's a Strat, or it's a Telecaster, or it's a Gibson Les Paul with sunburst paint job. Well, maybe not the latter. We can tell an awful lot about it. If we're a synth spotter, we can say, oh, that's a real TB303. Nah, that's one of those clones. Or that's a Subtractor, or that's a Thor, or that's a Mini Brute. We can synth spot them with a reasonable amount of accuracy, provided there's not too many effects, because we tend to play things low, and there's a lot of differentiation there. So this is part of why we tend to like our basses to be fairly low, other than just the pure adrenaline thing of being punched in the guts with this sound. Not actually good for you. It's like eating sugar or taking some speed every 20 minutes. It's not great for you if that's the only thing you're doing with music. But understand those things, and if you want your sound to be warmer, it's not so much a case of saying, oh look, I'm going to put a sub on it. It makes it warmer on its own, but if you've got a busy mix, it just makes it muddy. All depends what you're doing. But you can simply choose a harmonic within that you want to emphasize. Within instruments, not always as easy, and if you do it obviously, then it sounds funny like that. It sounds a bit obvious. But a mix engineer will constantly be doing that. I watched a video with Glenn Fricker this morning. He's got some new plugins that are all about that. I wasn't watching it closely enough to be able to say what they were or exactly what he was doing, but it was all about, he's mixing a drum kit, you know, one of those real things that people hit too hard. But he's mixing a real drum kit, and he's going through and actually finding the overtones in each individual sound in the kit. So somewhat like this, he's going, okay, yep, I'm going to pick out that overtone in the snare because it's going to give a nice ring. And so this piece of software is specialized in helping you find those within drums. You don't need it, because you can do it with this. That's why God invented an EQ. We can simply go, ooh. If we narrow our band down, I can kill him. I've merely changed the harmonic series. If you've got an even pointier band, different kind of EQ, then you can pick out a particular fundamental. And in something that's static like drums, great. You can pick it out and enhance it, or say, yeah, we don't really want you. You make more damage than good in the mix, we'll get rid of you. But be careful of doing that. Too much getting rid of, you get rid of everything, and then you end up with a really sterile, flat sound. You know, just go by a priest's firepower. So basically, that's covered everything that's within that article. Yes, this is a little bit long and rambling. You may want to watch it a few times to really understand it, but bass is about enhancing the fundamental of the piece, the fundamental of the chord that you're playing. You can do that low, but you can still achieve that drive that the bass gives you high, so long as your notes are correct and your timing is correct. So if you're emphasizing your ones, twos, threes, or fours, rather than emphasizing your off beats, the beats that are not really on the beat. 3/16 after the 1 is probably not a note that rhythm that you want to emphasize, unless that is part of your thing. Then of course you're moving your bass to that point to say, here's where my rhythm is. Don't be afraid of working higher than you might initially think that you want to work with your bass. Not only in the notes that you play, but in where you EQ. While that sounds great in the solo, it's probably a disaster in the mix. Because it's a disaster in the mix, you can't hear it, or it's just created mud. And at that point, it loses the differentiation, it loses the impact, which is giving you all the things above, which is your emphasizing your root notes and your timing. If you can't hear it either because it's just physically no longer there because it's too low for the speaker to duplicate, we might as well just mute it. Any questions that you have? Question box down below. Happy to engage. You have a good day now.